Yes, Mark, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for this great opportunity to share experiences from other parts of the world. Bocar, Thiam, and I are deeply appreciative of the presentation by Luis. It fits very nicely with what we will be discussing over the next 20 minutes. Our presentation will be divided into 5 sections. It will focus primarily on sharing practical experiences from our 20 years of working together in West Africa, primarily in Guinea and Cote d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast, as is said in Spanish. The questions that we will be dealing with may not appear relevant to Colombia. However, we argue that our experiences could be very useful for this seminar today. We recognize that cultural and economic situations are very different, and yet we suggest that in the sector of artisanal, or as said in Colombia, subsistence mining, there are many commonalities. We would like to stress for our presentation that we talk about artisanal mining in the Spanish or Colombian context, that is subsistence mining. We will be talking about mining in alluvial areas of West Africa. These are areas of high biodiversity, generally forests that are in and around water streams or rivers. We would also like to stress that these are in areas where government presence is very limited. That is, the ministries of mining and geology have very limited presence due to staffing shortages and limited administrative presence. Mining authorities tend to enforce regulations. They do not have a strong record of trust and confidence with local communities based on providing technical support. We will not go into the conceptual definitions of ecological rehabilitation or land rehabilitation. We would like to stress, however, that there is a very rich literature on land restoration. And the literature shows us the many steps that need to be followed in seeking to restore the landscape to some type of future condition. The major question for us during this presentation is the following: what type of environmental condition do stakeholders seek? That is, miners, local communities, mining companies, and governments. Is it the original state of the forest, like Luis was talking about, or is it some other type of intermediary condition? And these questions are dealt with in the literature on the field, especially that presented by the Society for Ecological Restoration. To repeat a little bit with what Luis talked about previously, we as practitioners must ask ourselves the question: what type of environmental recovery are we seeking? We as technicians, what about the views of local communities, of the miners themselves, of the government actors in a particular area? So in the case of West Africa, you see in the picture below a degraded landscape. And in this degraded landscape, primarily used by artisanal miners for the extraction of diamonds, but also gold. These lands, in some cases, in pilot examples, are being restored to another use. The land is being repaired and converted into gardening or horticultural activities. But in some cases, the land is being restored to its initial environmental situation of nearly total ecosystem recovery, concepts covered by Luis already. What are the technical approaches that Bocar, Thiam, and I have been using? We have been experimenting over the last 15 years or so with what we call smarter mining steps. And these are 7 basic steps that we are introducing to artisanal diamond and gold miners in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea, in Liberia, and in the Central African Republic. The steps consist of the following. First of all, we work with artisanal miners to help them identify the layer of gravel in which is found diamonds and gold. In West Africa, in alluvial areas, you find mixed in the same level of clay and gravel, both diamonds and gold flakes. We work with the ministries of mining and geology to help the miners stake out their mining site built based upon using hand augers to identify the vein of diamonds or gold. Then we introduce step terracing or bench terracing, where the surface is removed, where the soil and earth is removed in a bench terrace fashion down to the level of the gravel. But as the digging occurs, the waste soil fills up the space that had been mined out previously. So women primarily will take the gravel out, wash the gravel, work to sell the gold and the diamonds, and the diamond miners will then fill in the pit, eventually cover the pit with the topsoil that has been put aside. The topsoil is improved with the addition of manure, of compost, or other organic matter. And then, as in the case of large-scale mining operations shown by Luis, the land is planted in trees, grasses, or is used for vegetable production. So this is what we call smarter mining. We would like to stress that our efforts are pilot efforts. We have been encountering difficulties in scaling up our activities. We have found that it's very difficult to scale up environmental rehabilitation because of the high cost of labor in rural communities, but also the absence of capital or financing needed to pay for the labor to restore the land. Formalization in West Africa is very, very difficult. In the conditions of a weak government with limited presence in rural areas, formalization is very slow, very cumbersome. In some cases, we find that natural regeneration is the only way to restore the landscape. However, in alluvial mining areas, natural regeneration in tropical zones can be very rapid and very effective. We have also found in some countries, like in Ghana, where mechanized mining is now occurring, the sites of environmental degradation are too big for artisanal miners to restore. In these cases, The approaches discussed by Luis make a lot of sense. However, the governments of these countries often do not enforce existing mining regulations that are in mining codes and environmental law. So to move now to the case of what environmental or land restoration looks like in Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire, as well as Guinea. I turn to the case of Cote d'Ivoire. This area we call Ségala is the center of diamond production in Cote d'Ivoire, as is the smaller area of Tortilla. Diamond and gold mining is along alluvial streams and rivers, and this is because the diamonds come from volcanoes that used to be in these areas, and these are alluvial sediments of diamonds. In Cote d'Ivoire, there have been efforts to associate large-scale mining with artisanal mining in the way that was discussed by Gavin Hilson this morning, cooperation between large-scale parastatal companies and local. What does the landscape look like damaged by diamond and gold mining in Cote d'Ivoire? We find a moonscape of damaged gallery forests or stream beds where diamond mining has occurred. These are pools of water that are old diamond mining pits. So for us, the issue is the following. How can one encourage environmental recovery in these very biologically rich areas of forest cover in and along stream beds? Can one speed up the process of environmental restoration? And this is what the landscape looks like. If we go down to the local level, these areas are highly degraded from the extraction of diamonds and gold. However, these pools of water have many uses. They are cattle drinking areas. They're also very interesting areas of fisheries, of inland fisheries, where indigenous fish grow in these pools of water during the rainy season. Ethnic groups from neighboring countries come to this area, fish, and they sell the fish to the local communities. So this experience of working at the local level has shown to us a key lesson. It's very important to try to understand how a degraded landscape is used by a local community. One cannot assume that mined out areas of artisanal mining spaces are automatically useless lands. What we find is that there's multiple uses in these landscapes, and we as outsiders need to understand better how the land is used before we discuss environmental restoration. What we find in the case of Cote d'Ivoire is that in some cases, natural regeneration in lowland wetlands is remarkably fast. Mined out areas like this photo in the left can convert themselves, if the land is left alone, to the original or nearly original state in about 30 years. However, the question is, can the process be sped up? And that is what Luis was trying to do in his large-scale mining operations. Or alternatively, are there other uses of the land? We have found that if one does very careful participatory research with local communities, you find all the time that local communities are restoring their land themselves, often without any government assistance. And in this case of these pictures, what we found is that it's marginal or vulnerable people, especially women, who are most likely to restore the land by themselves and for themselves. It's marginalized people in the local economy, either migrants or women seeking land, who are the ones that provide themselves the labor. They use their own technical knowledge. They use their own strength to convert mined out diamond pits into rice production, gardening, and sometimes fish production or aquaculture. We find that it's the outsider, migrants, and the women who are sometimes the most innovative in their rehabilitation of land damaged by artisanal mining. So this is a case in Côte d'Ivoire that's very interesting of both natural regeneration, but also of assisted land recovery, especially by marginalized communities. I now turn to Bocar Thiam.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, for this intro, and thank you, New America, for giving us the opportunity to participate in the great presentation, Louis, by the way. The Guinea case we are presenting here took place in Freudenberger, where we work with 7 communities to test land rehabilitation. Environmental rehabilitation was one component of this project on resource governance that we implemented, and the project was funded by USAID. So in Freudenberger, there are areas where diamond was discovered by some migrants from a neighboring country, and these migrants used indigenous knowledge to do their own exploration, and they found out that there was diamond, alluvial diamond. So what they did was afterward was to negotiate with local landowners to have access to the alluvial plains and to start alluvial diamond mining. During that time, as Mark was saying, the state government was not present in the area. Next slide, Mike. So when the project started intervening in this area, there were some incentives here that we found out, and we were able to build on and to work with the communities to invest in land rehabilitation. The first incentive was that the lowland area where people were doing mining was becoming really scarce, because when diamond mining has taken place, miners were not refilling the land, even though the law was very clear that when you finish digging, you have to refill. But no refilling was taking place. So the land that was available for other purposes, I mean, that land was really becoming very scarce, and the population was really increasing, and there was that diamond rush actually in that region. The second incentive was really the existence of a very strong market opportunity very close to Freudenberger. First, you have the capital city of Guinea, which is Conakry. Conakry has about 2 million people, and there's no farming taking place in Conakry or in the surrounding area. So Conakry rely on all of these prefectures that are in the surrounding areas, Freudenberger being one of them. So the market opportunity was out there. And even in Freudenberger city by itself, there was really a market opportunity for agricultural products. So those 2 things really helped a lot to promote land rehabilitation. The other thing was also the project was being out there and providing technical support that gave some incentive to local communities to participate in land rehabilitation. And one important aspect also was really to clarify and secure rights for people who will be investing in land rehabilitation. In Guinea, the national law recognized on surface rights, but subsurface is owned and managed by the government on behalf of the people. So anything below 6 feet is under the management of the government. As Marco was saying, alluvial diamond is found under the gravel, and the gravel is always way below 6 feet. So the government had a say on that. So helping the miners to secure their right once, or the communities to secure their right once land rehabilitation has was incentive allowed us to promote rehabilitation. So the project provided financial and technical support to these communities, and the communities get organized. So instead in rehabilitation, a Bakri field that were like kilos. So they brought them into good use, and then planted some vegetables, and on right they were in that. So the photo that you have out there was really like the process used both rehabilitation side. Louis mentioned rehabilitation. This is exactly what restoring the land to the original stage did not take place, but at least we were moving towards a recovery that will put the land in good use. Small scale, we were able to help them get back some of their land through land rehabilitation. Also, the smart technique that I just mentioned. So I will stop there, and Mark, next slide, please.
Yes, I will finish up now to try to leave you with some general lessons learned. I think from the very beginning of an environmental or land rehabilitation initiative, one needs to work in an inclusive and participatory way with the local communities and the owners of the land in a very participatory fashion before you launch your environmental recovery program. Second, it's important to take account of a spectrum of socioeconomic factors. You need to look at how labor is organized. Is it individual or is it collective labor involved in land rehabilitation? You need to look at the price of labor in the local economy. Is labor expensive or is labor cheap? We found in West Africa that labor is quite expensive. So artisanal miners' time is very precious. And so environmental rehabilitation has to make economic sense vis-a-vis the high cost of labor. As Bocar mentioned, land rights must be considered because those who have firm land rights are liable to invest in the rehabilitation of the land if they have guaranteed benefits from the labor invested. Luis brought up the issue of capital. Where does capital come from in the artisanal mining sector? Artisanal miners do not have capital. They work at the margins, like Gavin Hilson said this morning. So where are they going to get the capital? Is it from a government who does not have much money to begin with? Or does it come from investors or other actors? This is a huge problem. And finally, the technicity. Oftentimes, artisanal miners have the indigenous knowledge, like Bocar alluded to restore the land by themselves. However, in some situations, there's very serious geological or environmental issues that require a lot of technical assistance. This is especially true if mercury has been introduced into the economy to facilitate the extraction of gold. Once mercury is in the environment, as you all know, as mining specialists, the situation is much more complicated. Or if there are heavy metals in the water and the water used by fish, contamination of fish is possible from heavy metals that are in the water of the pools that I showed you in the pictures in Côte d'Ivoire. So our final lesson is that indeed environmental rehabilitation is possible in the artisanal mining sector. However, one size does not fit all. Environmental rehabilitation emerges out of specific contexts and specific situations. So finally, to leave you with these thoughts, we have talked a lot in our presentation about incentives. We've mentioned many different incentives: participation of local communities, market incentives, engaging with youth, women, and marginalized people searching for land in landscape areas. We've stressed the importance of recognizing and clarifying property rights. We've stressed the importance of benefits accruing to those who rehabilitate the land by and for themselves. And we've talked about the importance of providing technical extension services, ideally by geologists and governmental specialists, but also the private sector has an important role. We have not mentioned much about the disincentives, and that is that many mining codes in West and Central Africa do not specify well the responsibilities and land rights to those who are rehabilitating the land. Mining codes are not always fairly enforced in transparent ways. Corruption and rent-seeking behavior is very predominant by mining officials in many parts of West Africa. And this is a disincentive for creating trust and confidence between artisanal miners and governmental actors. And finally, we stress this following point. It's very important to work with community sanctions. Local communities are oftentimes able to enforce rules and norms for land management in a more efficient and effective way than laws and regulations, especially in situations of weak government presence. In countries of West Africa, where customary or traditional authorities are very strong and very powerful, we are finding that traditional authorities have enormous abilities and enormous powers to enforce community codes and community norms that encourage the rehabilitation of lands damaged by mining of gold and diamonds. So this is an optimistic story, not necessarily a negative story we present to you this afternoon. However, we recognize that these are pilot activities, and we are confronting enormous difficulties in scaling up these pilot initiatives to reach the thousands, if not millions, of artisanal miners scattered throughout West and Central Africa. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.